Code Veronica is one of two remakes presumably in line to be on their way. Resident Evil 0 is mentioned as the other, but we're not here to talk about that one. Or Resident Evil 9, which is also on its merry way. Code Veronica Remake is something fans have for a long time wanted and presumed would arrive after we got Resident Evil 3 Remake.
What the fuck?
That didn't happen. Not a huge deal as it currently stands, but when Code Veronica Remake does come, what do we need to see in improvements? What should it look like? And realistically, how soon can we expect to see it? Since we've had a handful of remakes already, remaking Code Veronica is a bit easier. And from what recent news we've heard of not putting the full Resident Evil 4 remake treatment of money and time into it, Code Veronica might be cutting corners as much as possible. That may sound dire, but it's probably not as bad as it sounds.
Oh my god!
There's a ton of already built assets, and with using the well-established Resident Evil engine and gameplay mechanics already in place, it really comes down to cutscenes, character modeling, and level design. That may not be what fans want to hear, but I'm sure Capcom is well aware of what went wrong with Resident Evil 3 Remake and likely won't repeat the same mistakes. Although, don't be shocked if a half-hearted Code Veronica Remake still charges full price. Looking at the original specifically, what can we cut, trim, enhance, and improve in remaking Code Veronica? Let's dive more into details of the original game. For characters, the biggest thing, you know what's coming, is to fix Steve. Not neuter him like a dog, although maybe if we're keeping the cringe romance in. I'm talking his persona, the whining, his purpose in the game itself. Too often he appears in cutscenes and is of no actual help to the player. He needs a role that accomplishes something positive. Most of the remaining cast members, I'd argue, only need minimal changes in modernization to non-cheesy dialogue. The remake timeline is very serious in tone. That tacky dialogue you remember isn't ever coming back. Wesker could use tweaking on his newfound cat-like reflexes. By that, I mean explain or show why he's now superpowered, or remove it entirely. Resident Evil 4 Remake makes it look removed, which should take place after the events of this game, but plot twist if Capcom flips it to happening after. In regards to the level design, the initial issue in the original is that it didn't really look like the way it was portrayed. And by that I mean the hardware limited the setting to look like a hotel plaza, more than a military facility. I'd like to see more of a fortress look with a shipyard, a runway, the military base at its core. Play into that design more so. More thoughtful design is required. I'm not really worried about it, as I'm sure Capcom will do just fine. Even if they cut out and alter some hallways and rooms, it doesn't detract from the end result like it would if, say, the RPD had drastically changed, or the Spencer Mansion. Those are iconic. Don't mess with locations. The random bunker or Antarctic base layout changing isn't as iconic as those. Alterations to those shouldn't be game ruining like it was for, say, Resident Evil 3 Remake. As the game goes along, eventually the baton is handed from playing as Claire to Chris. This is where redundancy sets in, as when you begin as Chris, you go through areas that you spent hours traversing as Claire. Sure, there's splattering of new rooms, but mostly you've seen it and been there. Toss this to the wayside. The other big issue this game had was with inventory, and if mismanaged, could be game ruining. Chris shouldn't have to rely on Claire's progress or ill-advised use of supplies. Make it a clean slate. Even if it feels like the player is starting over mid-game, I'd rather not be hindered by what I did or unawareingly didn't do that ends up sabotaging the playthrough. I believe it's pretty safe to say there will be considerate overhaul for most boss fights. The most egregious one being the Tyrant on a plane. I could see that being boiled down to a cutscene or reworked entirely. Also, the tyrant's purpose overall in the game could be altered to that of stalking Claire, a la Mr. X, to induce a little extra panic upon his release. Most other bosses will likely receive tweaks, with a couple possibly being cut or relegated to optional. The original game's layout is one of the weakest in the series, made more frustrating by excess backtracking. A remake doesn't need to stick rigidly to every detail in this instance, as long as it retains the core elements. An island with a military facility and prison, a mansion, and an Antarctic base. It has the freedom to refine the flow and structure. What concerns me is that Code Veronica, which arguably requires the most thoughtful planning and reworking out of all the original games, seems to be treated more like a checkbox for Capcom to get through before moving on to potentially bigger titles like Resident Evil 9. This game has incredible potential, but I'm worried that instead of polishing this gem to perfection, we may end up with a simple modernization that overlooks the areas that needed improvement in the first place. Well, I was going to say this week at PlayStation's State of Play or Capcom's event would have produced at least an honorable mention of any Resident Evil game. Sadly, that was not the case. Just hold out a little bit longer for October or early November for a Capcom showcase or alternate event for non-Monster Hunter related content. We've seen this happen a few times in recent years. If I had to throw an educated guess out, I think Resident Evil 9 is going to be the focus, with this game also getting mentioned in the works as well, but probably not to the same degree as Resident Evil 9. What changes are you hoping to see in Code Veronica's remake, and what do you want kept the same? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and in regards to other remakes, be sure to check out this video. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time on Hittobox.